For our first JavaFX demo, I'm going to simply cut and paste some code from the slides directly into the IDE so we can take a look at how this particular demonstration works. So let's create a new Java project which we'll call MyJavaFX. And we'll add a class to it also called MyJavaFX. And then I'm just going to go ahead and replace the stub with what we see on the slides and in the textbook. So before we run this, let's talk our way through what we have going on here. Well, first of all, you'll notice there's a number of imports that we need to do. These are things from JavaFX that we're going to be utilizing in this demo. First of all, this is one that was specifically spoken about because in the case of JavaFX applications, you always start by inheriting from this particular class. So right away you're going to have to import javafx.application.capital-application, and it's that class that you're going to extend. In fact, we see that happening exactly right here. This is our own class, public class myJavaFX extends application. So this is now going to be a subclass of the application class, and that's going to be true for any JavaFX application that we write. The next thing we do is we import javafx.scene.capital scene, and that's because a scene is an important element in a GUI application. We'll talk more about exactly what a scene is. The next import is .control.button. We're going to put a button on our application, and that's why we're going to have to import that. And finally, as with all JavaFX applications, we need a stage. Again, we'll define what stage and scene are later as we go through this, but for now we're just going to demonstrate these things. So again, we would have to import them. So the application class has an abstract function called start, and it's up to us to override it. So you can see we're doing an override here of public void start stage primary stage. We will get called when we start a GUI program running with a stage. Our start method will be called with a stage passed to it, an initial stage. We can make more stages if we want, and again, we still need to define what a stage is, but that will come later. In any case, a stage is a necessary part of a GUI application because a stage is where the graphics are going to appear. We are going to create a button and put it in the scene. Again, we haven't defined exactly what a scene is yet, but you'll see that momentarily. And we need to put the scene in the stage in order to see it. So here's where we create our scene. It's a predefined class called scene. We make an object of that class called lowercase scene, and then we say equals new scene, and we give some parameters. The first parameter is something that we're going to put into the scene, in this case a button that we've defined in the preceding line right here. And the next two parameters are the size of the scene. So in this case 200 pixels by 250 pixels. We then need to create or to take our stage that we've been passed as an argument up here. Now we don't have to call it primary stage. We can call it whatever we want. But we are going to be passed it. We need to give it a name here, and that name has to be used to refer to it. So you can see down here it's been used 3 times. The set title method for stages, in our case our primary stage, is going to determine what title applies to the window. In our case we want to entitle it Java or MyJavaFX, so that's why we do this line of code that you see here. And then we need to set a scene within the stage. We've created a scene in this line where we've dropped a button into the scene, and now we drop the scene into the stage, or as the comment says, place the scene in the stage. Now that we've done all those things, we're ready to actually show the stage. Up to this point, nothing would have appeared on the screen, and then finally, when this line of code gets executed, the stage that we've now produced by putting something in a scene, putting the scene in the stage, it's now ready to show, and when we say primary stage dot show, it will actually show on the screen. Before we run this, we need to explain what's on the bottom of this, because usually you're going to find you won't need this. In fact, the comment here, if we read it here together, the main method is only needed for the IDE with limited JavaFX support. It's not needed for running from the command line. So if you're going to start your GUI from the command line, you don't need this at all. If you're going to start it from within the Eclipse or from within a GUI in a Windows environment, then you may or may not need this depending on your environment. It turns out that if you're running Eclipse on a Windows machine, then you aren't going to need this. It doesn't hurt to have it. It won't make things not work by having it, but it's simply not necessary. In such IDEs, what's going to happen is one of two things. When you go to run a program, it either looks for a main method, and if it can't find a main method, it will look for a start method automatically. But not all environments do that. And in case they don't, if you're in a programming environment that only looks for a main method and must find it in order to run, then you'll go ahead and supply a main method, just like you see here, but you'll simply do a launch with whatever args were originally passed back here to the main method. So you simply pass those arguments on to something called launch. Now in Eclipse IDE, this won't be necessary, because in Eclipse what happens is it will look for a start, which it will find right here, and that will be good enough for it to go ahead and run the GUI. So we can, and generally will, simply remove this stuff from all of our demos because we don't need it. Alright, so I think we're ready to actually run the demo now. So let's go ahead and click on that, click on this, and the demo has run, and here is what popped up. So there's the title, My Java FX. That comes from this line of code that you see right here, where we set the title. The size of the window that you see is 200 by 250, so this dimension 200 is the X dimension, 250 is the Y dimension. So we have 200 pixels this way, and we have 250 pixels in this dimension, up and down. We've put a button in the middle of our scene, and so this is the button. You'll notice that the background lights up when the cursor moves onto the button. You can see then that the button is occupying the entire window. It's not a little button, it's the whole window is the button. And because right here we've labeled the button with an OK, that's why you see the OK in the middle here. Now of course you can point at and click on this button and nothing useful happens, because at this point we're only looking in chapter 14 at producing the graphics. In order to get a button to actually respond to a click, we need to study a little bit more material that we won't encounter until we go through chapter 15. So again, at this point, all we're going to see is graphic elements being produced in these windows, and we aren't going to have things that we can actually point at and click on and do anything useful with, at least not yet. So that completes our first initial introduction to JavaFX programming. Now we're going to go back and dissect some of these things we've seen. What is a scene, and what is a stage, and what is happening in some of these parts of this program.